Hi again, Mark here from Talkingbass.net. So have you ever listened to a walking bass line and heard some of those cool little triplet skips or drops that sound something like this? When I was first learning to walk, I'd hear guys or gals putting those triplets in there, and it'd just freak me out because I was spending so much energy just hanging on for dear life, just trying to outline the chords and trying to get through the tune. So today I've got a couple of tips for those of you that feel like I did that should help with adding some triplets into your playing. Remember that the lesson material is all available to view over at Talkingbass.net, so just click on that link in the info below, and while you're there, check out the lesson map where you'll find hundreds more lessons, all organised and systemised for ease of navigation, unlike all this chaos over here at YouTube. So there are a bunch of ways that you can add triplets into your walking bass lines, but the majority of them involve playing through notes of the chord that you're playing over, so that's the chord tones. So for my first tip, we're going to look at a simple way of dropping down through the notes of a triad. So let's take a simple 2-5-1 chord progression in C major. So that's D minor 7, G7 and C major 7. We'll also add an A7 on the end there just to bring us back round. So a normal walking bass line through that progression might sound something like this. So that's just a pretty standard walking bass line outlining that chord progression with a framework of chord tones and a bunch of scales and chromatic notes thrown in for good measure. Now if you need to know how to play any of that stuff, if you're new to walking bass lines, then I've got a bunch of lessons over here at YouTube, so just click on the link in the info below. You'll see a bunch of different links in there. And also, this month sees the release of Talking Bass's Simple Steps to Walking Bass, so be sure to sign up to the Talking Bass newsletter to receive news on that. But back to the triplets. So to add a little drop through the triads, we need to know a couple of little shapes. So one of the easiest ways to drop down through a triad is like this. So I'm just raking down across the strings. And to do this, we're going to learn the major and minor triads. So the major triad is going to be good for any major bass chords like the major 7 or the dominant 7, and the minor triad is going to be good for the minor 7. So let's have a look at the triads. Now, if you don't know anything about triads, all we have with the triad is simply a root, a third, and a fifth. Okay, so if we're on a C major, if we're on a C major triad, the root note is C. We're going to use a major third, so that's going to be the E there, so you need to know your intervals for this, and then we have a perfect fifth from the C, so that's going to be the G. So we have C, E, and G. Okay, so root, major third, perfect fifth. So there, the fingering I'm using the third fret of the A string and then the second and fifth frets of the D string. Okay, easy. Something you probably already know, okay? So for the minor triad, we just have a root note and then a minor third and a perfect fifth. So there's only one half step difference. So if we were to play down here, we'd have C, E flat, and G. So that's third fret A string, first fret, and fifth fret on the D string. And the most common way to play that is actually with that E flat taken up to here on the A string. So that'd be third fret A string, sixth fret A string, and then fifth fret on the D string. Okay, so that's the major triad and the minor triad. So those two triad patterns are fine, you get a good grounding in what the notes of the triad are, but for our triplet drop patterns, we're going to want to be raking across the strings and we're going to need a different fingering. So for the triplet that we're going to be looking at here, we're going to be starting on the high root note, okay? So let's say that we take a C major as our main chord. Let's look at the C there at the fifth fret of the G string. So we've got the C there, and then we want to come down across the strings. So the next note that we can grab there from the triad is going to be the fifth. So that's going to be the G. And then we can hit the third down here on the E, okay? So in effect, that is actually a first inversion fingering, but don't worry about that for now. But the whole point of this is that we've just taken that set of notes, the C, the E, and the G, and we've just arranged them across the strings so we can come down like this. And if you know all your alternative fingerings for your triads, then this will make a lot of sense. So C, G, and E. Okay, so 5th fret on the G and the D string, and then 7th fret on the A string. Okay, so one thing you can do with this is come down, let's say, raking with the 1st finger. So we just work our way down across the strings, and I'm actually releasing pressure as I move. So I'm not holding down a chord like this. I'm playing with the 1st finger there for these 2 notes, and I'm kind of using this joint barring technique where I'm playing that C there with pretty much around the joint area on that 1st finger, and then I'm just using the pad there on the end of the finger for the G. So I'm just kind of rocking the finger a little bit there, and then I'm using the 4th finger, the pinky, for the E, and I'm kind of releasing pressure on each note as I go. So I play the 1st note, and then I kind of rock across, so I'm releasing pressure on the 1st one, and then I release pressure again on this 1st finger and play the 4th finger. Okay, so that's the key to getting a nice drop down through those notes. Okay, so once we come down, we can then drop down onto the root note, the C there at the 3rd fret of the A string, and we can play that with the 2nd finger. So we rake across with the 1st finger, and then play that last note with the 2nd finger. So we get this nice rolling arpeggio. Okay. For the minor triad, we just adapt that fingering. So we come down again, so let's say this is C minor. So we're going to come down C, G, and then we would have the E flat, okay, instead of the E. So this is the 6th fret of the A string. So 5th fret on the G and D string, and then 6th fret on the A string. And then again, we can come down to the C. Okay, so there we have 2 chords. We've got the C major and the C minor. Okay. So now let's try adding those triplet drops to our chord progression. So remember, we've got that 2, 5, 1 in C. So we're going to start on the D minor 7. And for each of these chords, I'm going to add the triplets in turn. And I'm going to just add them on the 1st beat. Now you can add them on any beat, but we're just going to focus on the 1st beat for now, just so you can get used to them. So for the D minor 7, okay, we're going to start on this D 7th fret of the G string. And then we can come down our minor drop. Okay, and then we can walk around. Okay, so this is all written out in the lesson material, so I'm not going to work through every single note here. You can just go on over to talkingbass.net, click on the link in the info below, and you'll see all of this written out, sheet music and tab, so you can learn the whole line, okay? But the whole point of this is that we're adding this triplet in here, okay? Bringing it round again with the A. Now let's try adding a triplet to the G7. So we're only going to add 1 to each chord at any one time. So we're going to come up through the D. Then when we get to the G, remember it's going to be a major triad because it's a G7, so it's based on that major triad. So we've come down. Okay, so coming down on the G, and then we're back up to the C. So now let's add a triplet to the C major 7. So this is going to be just how we learned the triad. So there we are at that top C, 5th fret of the G string, and dropping down. Okay, so with the walking bass line, 2, 3, 4. And finally, let's try adding a triplet to the A7 at the end. So obviously the A7 isn't a part of the key of C major, it's a secondary dominant chord, so it's an A7, so we're going to be using the major triad in there. So if we add that to the bass line, we're going to be coming down on the major triad, A, E, C sharp, and and then A. And with the walking bass line, we would have 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's one quick way of adding triplets into your walking lines. The other way, the second tip, is pretty similar, but this time we're using an open string as a ghost note, okay? And that's going to sound like this. So with a chord progression of D minor 7 to G7, it might sound like this. Okay, so there it is, the triplet at the start. With this triplet, we're going to play 2 chord tones raked across 2 strings. So if we take the D minor 7 to G7 as the example, we're going to play the D there, 7th fret of the G string, and then the A at the 7th fret of the D string. So that's the root and the 5th. Okay, very simple pattern. So that's the first 2 notes of the triplet. And then for the 3rd note of the triplet, we're going to play the open string. So we're going to play the open D string. So that open string is on the same string as our 2nd note. So we're only playing on 2 strings as opposed to the 3 strings with the triad. So we rake over the G and the D string there with the 1st finger, and then the open string is with the 2nd finger, okay? Okay, so then if I was to play D minor 7 to G7, that gives us our triplet. At speed. So that's a really easy way of adding triplets in there, but you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's all well and good, you know, playing the open D string there because the chord is D minor 7, so, you know, it's in tune, you know. But what if we're playing over something else? What if we tried E flat minor 7 to A7, you know, just upper half step? It's just not going to work because then if I play E flat, it's out of tune. Well, this is where it still works because we're using that final open string as a bit of a ghost note. It goes by so fast with such a rolling feel that you just don't notice. So, okay, so you don't really hear it in there. But one thing that you can do to make it to make sure of that is that when you play it and you come into the open string, then you keep the hand slightly against the string so that you do get a ghost note. So we're actually getting a full dead note in there. Now, you know, you don't have to think about this too much. Don't really get slowly into the technique of it because as it goes by at speed, that kind of happens anyway, you know, because as you're moving, you don't really have to think about putting the ghost note in there. If you just think about actually playing it as the open string, but then just move the hand to the next note, in effect, that's usually what you're going to do. So don't overthink it, but, you know, basically that 3rd note of the triplet is acting as a ghost note. So once again, let's try applying those triplets to each chord in turn in our chord progression, our 2-5-1 in C. So we'll begin with the D minor 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's try adding to the G7. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And now let's try adding to the C major 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And finally, let's try the A7. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 2 simple ways of adding triplets into your walking bass lines. Now, there are obviously many different ways to add triplets. At the end of the day, it's just a rhythm. But focusing on a couple of simple techniques to begin with, you can get started build up a bit of confidence, and then just start to diversify by adding more different choices into your vocabulary. So remember, the simple steps to walking bass will be out very, very soon, taking you from the absolute basics all the way up to improvising a walking bass line through any chord progression all over the neck. And it's all done in progressive, simple steps. So look out for that. Sign up for the totally free Talkingbass membership, where you'll get a whole bunch of different practice resources, and I'll see you next week.